In the shadow of the North Georgia mountains, one woman endured more tragedy in her lifetime than most men could have survived in 10. This is the incredible, true story of Bessie Stowers. Our story begins in the rugged foothills of the North Georgia mountains, where the hollers run deep and life has always been a test of endurance. Now, some folks are born under the gentle sun and are blessed with a life full of happy days. But you see, this wasn't the case for Bessie. From the time she was a little girl, running barefoot through the red clay of Dawson County, tragedy seemed to walk beside her like a shadow that she never could shake. Bessie entered this world on a cold winter day on November 8th, 1886 in Dawson County, Georgia, the second of 6 children born to Lewis Green Stowers and Rosanna Graham. Now, life in the Georgia mountains at the turn of the century was simple enough, but it was also unforgiving. You see, rural families barely scratched out a living on their small farms by raising corn, beans, and a few hogs. It was common for children to work alongside their parents as soon as they were able to walk, and with the nearest town being a long wagon ride away, the mountains themselves, as beautiful as they were, served as a harsh and isolating wall from the outside world. As a girl, Bessie helped carry water from the spring and tend to the garden, and also to mind her younger siblings alongside her mama.
I've been on this gospel way for many, many days, but I know it won't be long till I am gone.
Now, family was religious, and they attended services regularly down at the Harmony Baptist Church each and every time those doors swung open. Because when you live in a world absent of material riches, it's faith that is the glue that held you together. And the same was true for these mountain families in hard times. And it was here that Bessie learned the greatest lessons contained in the Bible by hearing raw and heartfelt sermons drawn straight from the pages of this scripture. Traveling preachers often spoke of the trials of the faithful, along with stories that were meant to prepare God's people for the storms of life. One of those stories that stayed with the young girl was from the book of Job. Week after week, she listened as the preacher man described how Job, a righteous and prosperous man, lost nearly everything in a single day: his livestock, his servants, and all 10 of his children when a great wind collapsed on the house. She learned how Job had then been afflicted with painful boils from head to toe, sitting in ashes and scraping his skin from broken pottery, while his own wife urged him to just curse God and die. Yet, through it all, Job refused to turn his back on the Lord. And although he cried out in anguish and questioned the Lord from time to time, Job never let go of his faith. And little did Bessie know at the time, but she too would need the faith of Job as the pages of her life unfolded. You see, when Bessie was only 12 years old, the first great blow fell upon her when her mother took sick with a fever. And after 3 agonizing, sleepless nights, her mama died. The loss left a hole in the family and in Bessie's heart that could never be fulfilled. But there was little time for grieving, and Bessie's father eventually remarried again. Now, while this new stepmother helped keep the household running, the truth is, nothing could replace a mother's love. And so, at just 12 years old, Bessie was forced to step into roles far beyond her age. She learned early on that in these mountains, you didn't get to stay a child for long. Instead, life would force you to grow up hard and fast, or you wouldn't make it. Now, the loss of Betsie's mama can't be understated, and it set the tone for the rest of her life. From that moment on, Betsie's life would become a long road of trials, each one forging her faith in fire, testing the strength in her bones, and daring her to keep standing when the mountain winds tried to bend and break her. But still, as they say, life goes on for the living, and by 1906, Bessie was 20 years old when she married a man named Lewis Edwin Cox, a farmer who lived on Clow Ridge. Now, Lewis was a good man, and he loved his wife with all his heart. And together, Lewis and Bessie began to build a life of their own, farming the same rocky soil and raising a family in the way that hill folks had done for generations. Over the years, 9 children were born to this union. 9 times, Bessie carried a child and then labored in pain and hope. But in a world absent of modern medical care, childbirth was dangerous, and many times it brought tragedy. 3 of Betsie's babies were stillborn. Another lived only 6 months, and yet another made it to 3 years before being taken by the cruel hands of fate. And the truth is, only a mother who's buried her own babies can understand the depths of the grief that Bessie must have felt having to dig the graves for 5 of her 9 children. Yet she kept going and loved each of her 4 children that remained fiercely. And through it all, she held onto her faith down at the Harmony Baptist Church, where Bessie could be seen each Sunday sitting in the front row with her hands raised towards the heaven, all while singing praises to the Lord. By the fall of 1925, Bessie and Lewis had been married for nearly 2 decades, raising 4 children on their large farm in northern Georgia. And that year had been good. After all, the crops had done well, and Bessie was very pregnant for the 10th time in her life, when, on the morning of November 23rd, the mother-to-be went into labor and gave birth to what would be her last child, a healthy baby boy. Yet, in a cruel twist of fate, just as one life entered this world, death waited just hours away, because later that same day, tragedy struck without warning when her husband Lewis was shot in the leg by a farmhand named Cliff Martin over a disagreement in wages. And just like that, Betsie's husband died. The entire community was stunned. Lewis was a prominent farmer, and his shooting made newspapers. And after a long trial, Lewis's killer was sentenced to life in prison. Now, some may have called that justice, but in the ashes of it all remained Bessie, who was now a widow, faced with raising her children and running a farm alone. And Lewis had always handled the family business and all financial affairs. It was all so foreign to Bessie, and within a few years, she had fallen way behind on payments, and by the spring of 1928, the bank foreclosed on the property and sold the farm at auction. Now alone, with young children and no land, Bessie tried to rebuild. That fall, just 77 days after her aunt had passed, Bessie married her aunt's widower, Harrison Couch. who was 20 years older than she was. Now, Harrison owned a local general store, and at first, it appeared that this might provide some stability. But Harrison was a man of many secrets. He was huge, standing over 6'4" and weighing nearly 300 pounds. And while most folks saw him as a gentle giant of sorts, once he had a belly full of whiskey, he became a very violent man behind closed doors and frequently inflicted savage beatings on Betsy. Almost daily for 2 years, the beatings continued before Betsy finally had the courage to leave. That's right, by the summer of 1930, Betsy had reached her limit, and she loaded up the wagon with her children and was determined to escape. Yet, as she prepared to drive away, her husband stepped in front of the team of horses in a rage, blocking her path, all while holding a double-barrel shotgun. "Woman, I done told you, by God, you ain't never gonna leave me, at least not while you're still breathing." And then Harrison Couch pointed the barrels at Betsy and pulled the trigger, unloading a single barrel right into her chest, blowing several of her fingers off in the process. Believing that she was dead, Harrison calmly walked back inside of the house and emptied the other barrel into his own head.
Give someone you love the gift of old-fashioned storytelling. 5 books for the young and old alike that will make your heart smile. Click the link below to order your copy of the Appalachian Storyteller today.
"'Tis so sweet to trust in Jesus, just to take him at his word, just to rest upon his promise, and to know thus saith the Lord. Jesus, Jesus, how I trust him, how I've proved him o'er and o'er. Jesus, Jesus, precious Jesus, oh, for grace to trust him more."
Miraculously, Betsy was still alive. You see, she had her pocketbook clutched in her hand across her chest, which absorbed some of the impact, and she managed to crawl to a neighbor's, who loaded her up in the back of their pickup truck and took her to the hospital in a nearby town and saved her life. After she recovered, Betsy moved into a small cabin where she would live for the remainder of her days. Now, she had endured so much, but through it all, she never wavered in her faith in the Lord and was the first to enter the sanctuary each service down at the church. The year 1940, it brought more heartbreak when her oldest 2 sons were hit by a drunk driver, and sadly, both boys lost their lives. It was more than Betsy's body could bear, and her health began rapidly failing her. Diabetes ravaged her body, and while hospitalized for complications, doctors had to amputate her leg, first just the foot and then above the knee. And while Betsy laid in that hospital bed, her 2 children went back to the old home place to clean up the yard. They raked the leaves and burned them to clear the area, but those flames spread to Bermuda grass that had grown underneath the pine porch floor, and then set the porch ablaze. Within minutes, the entire house was engulfed in flames. The children, they managed to drag some of Betsy's most treasured possessions out into the yard, but in their panic, they placed them too close to the burning building, and each of those items, too, caught fire and were burned. Everything was gone. The kids tried to keep the news from their mother, but eventually Bessie learned that everything she had managed to hold on to through all those years of tragedy had gone up in smoke. And on November 23rd, 1950, exactly 25 years to the day after her first husband Lewis had been killed, Bessie Stowers' couch passed away in the hospital at the age of 64. And the day of her funeral, it was as bitter as the life she'd lived had been. The temperature was a bone-chilling 5 degrees below zero as a frigid wind cut through the few mourners that were gathered around her casket when it was slowly laid into the frozen ground.
Oh, for grace to trust Him more.
Bessie was buried in the cemetery at Harmony Chapel Baptist Church in Dawson County, Georgia. The same church where she had listened to sermons as a little girl about the struggles and unshakable faith of Job. Bessie herself had endured a life that rivaled his. Ironically, her second husband, the one who tried to kill her, is buried just a few rows over in that same small graveyard. As tragic as Bessie's story is, it's one that's nearly been forgotten until now. May she forever rest in peace and receive all the riches of heaven.
Hey guys, JD Phillips here from the Appalachian Storyteller. Today's video is sponsored by tnnursery.net.
Family owned and operated in the heart of Appalachia, TN Nursery ships beautiful plants and trees all across America. Perennials, ferns, vines, trees, and much, much more. Click the link in the description to shop America's favorite garden shop. For quality landscaping trees and plants, get 15% off of your order by using promo code Storyteller at checkout.